Hi,
Okay.
folks. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Julie.
I'm Adam, and we're coming at you live on Valentine's Day with a very special guest who we know and love.
Yes. So Dr. Charles is the CIO of the Denver Public Schools. And Dr. Charles, Adam tells me that you've got a PhD in applied mathematics. You're a super deep thinker. And then you've also have some cool hobbies. So go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience. Tell us a little bit about your professional journey to the Denver Public Schools, who you are as a professional, and then who is Dr. Charles, the person.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for having me on this podcast. I'm really excited to have the discussion today. And working with Adam on a number of AI projects has been really exciting. And so I'm glad we're able to have this discussion. So a little bit of background about myself. I am the CIO, Chief Information Officer for Denver Public Schools. And my journey there was an interesting one because I started off in my undergraduate degree is in pure mathematics from the City University of New York, and came out to Colorado about 30 years ago to work on some AI projects with a gentleman by the name of Dr. Ed Freeman. And Ed was the first African American to graduate from UCLA's cognitive psychology program. And so he was working for a local telecom company called US West at the time. And we were located in Boulder, Colorado, and we were having a blast just coming up with ways to look at artificial intelligence and solve some interesting problems there. So did that for a while, went through the telecom industry, and then started working in the defense industry for a while, where I worked on some satellite programs. My PhD is in applied mathematics, and I'm a CU buff. So I'm very excited about that. So I'm looking forward to our football season this upcoming year. And I also spent some time in K through 12 education for about, I would say about 23 years now. And so been in K through 12 for 23 years, did a lot of work in the area of innovation and STEM education. And artificial intelligence was one of the subtopics of my PhD dissertation. And so just very excited about the work. And when I had an opportunity to explore what it's like to work with a large urban school district in the area of technology, I took advantage of it. And it turns out that one of my predecessors is the same Dr. Ed Freeman who brought me out to Colorado. So pretty exciting, and have some interesting hobbies. I love flying, everything about it. And I'm a real enthusiast for learning and writing code and things of that nature. So I do a lot of that behind the scenes.
Fantastic.
Julie, let me just jump in real quick. I know I told you I wouldn't do this, but I'm dying over here because first of all, I have to know: are you a Deion Sanders fan or not?
I am a Deion Sanders fan.
Okay.
I think what he's doing right now is pretty interesting. And I saw that CU just started a course on Deion Sanders and marketing. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. But yeah, there's a lot of good things happening, bringing a lot of attention to the university and to the program. I got to keep in mind that CU is getting notoriety now for their football program, but there are a number of Nobel laureates as in physics and a host of other areas for many years. So it's well deserved, I think.
Are their names Deion Sanders or no?
Perhaps.
So the other thing is the way that I met Dr. Charles was interesting because I was at the Council of Greater City Schools conference, and Tom Ryan and I were actually doing a presentation on generative AI. And of course, we always try to facilitate and leave it open for questions. And he kept raising his hand and asking questions, and that questions were like 5 levels higher than anything else in the room. So right after we were done, I walked over. I said, "Who are you? Like, you're different. Tell me about you." And that's when I learned a little bit about him. And ever since then, we've been in touch. And he didn't share that he's built, like, I don't know, it's probably up to 700 GPTs at this point as well. How many are you up to?
I think I'm up to 40 at this point. So I'm working through some interesting ones. And I think it's having an influence on that store as well. Cause I see other people are visiting and then building their own and taking some of the ideas. I'm excited to do some of that work.
Very cool. Well, if it allows you to get some season tickets to CU games too, right? They're
That's
just
right.
good there, yeah. So fascinating. Like your journey through the industry, defense, and then now K-12 education is really kind of interesting, especially because you have like everybody in education is talking about AI right now because of generative AI, but you have been in the AI game long before that came on the scene. So I'm curious, what keeps you up at night relative to generative AI and your role in a large public school system, both positive and negative.
Julie, that's a great question. And it's something that I think about quite a bit. So when I think about the space that we're in right now and the opportunities that we have around generative AI and artificial intelligence as a whole, I'm excited, right? I'm excited because of the chance to be able to solve some incredibly challenging problems that we've had for quite some time. And having a computer, not just as an extended tool like it has been in the past, but really having it be a thought partner or whatever we would like for it to be. I mean, this is really significant. And I think the general public has a sense of what is possible, but until we are really immersed in a lot of that work, it's going to take a while before they truly understand how different the world is going to be as a result. Things that keep me up at night on the good end of things is that potential for success and for us to be able to change how coding is done as a whole. I think the GPT store is a great example of how programming is going to evolve. It's nowhere near where it's going to be in the next, year or 5 years. But programming is very different. When I started programming, it was just at the ending point of punch cards. And my mom was a programmer and she would bring home these decks of punch cards and talk about how sequence is important. And of course, I'd get them out of sequence and then she'd have to figure it all out again. But then you had assembly language and COBOL, and she knew all of those languages. And now we're talking about just writing and communicating with software in the case of GPT through regular sentences and programming things that way. And that to me is really exciting. Gives us a chance to be able to close that gap between a concept that you think you can create and actually creating it. So it's very exciting. The things that are keeping me up on the back end that are negative, there are a lot of them, right? So the pace at which this technology is changing is pretty significant. There is no way that we can pause all of this and like there's an easy button, but there's a pause button to pause everything before we can conduct a study to say, what is the impact of AI and generative AI specifically on education or any field that is out there? Because it's changing so rapidly. Everything is new about this. And so we see that academia is lagging significantly behind corporate America when it comes to all of the research that's required in order for school districts and other entities to make decisions. And that's a challenge because there's no real study that says that generative AI is going to raise student achievement in some way. Yet everyone is diving in feet first, just going all in to try and figure all of this out. So for the first time, I think about the fact that action research needs to be taking place at the same time that all of this is evolving. Otherwise, we will lose opportunities to really collect good information about what's happening in this progression of the technology. And then, of course, all of the safeguards that need to be put in place with regard to information security, data privacy, all of those things are a concern to me as a CIO of a large urban school district. It's really important for us to be mindful of that. And all of the ways that you can work around it, right? Hack GPT, jailbreak GPT, the list is long and it's like playing whack-a-mole. Every time we find a vulnerability and we close it, another one pops up. So that's That's the main thing that keeps me up.
It's interesting hearing you talk. I did not realize that about your mom. It's almost like, tracing all that back and getting an interview and just hearing her kind of journey to where we are today would be kind of an interesting thing to hear the two of you talk about.
Mhm.
The other thing that I hadn't thought about till you just said it is the whole action research
Mhm.
piece, because I think next year you're going to see a lot more at the teacher and school level. And I wonder how we kind of build that into our process. So that was a really good.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. So I want to name a few of the things that you said and just kind of call those out. I'm curious about your journey, but you mentioned a lot of different things, right? You talked about building literacy across your organization. You talked about the evolution of skills development for students. You talked about how schools are preparing students to be work and life ready and how that's evolving. You talked about like organizational agility and how the pace and how, school systems are needing to really adjust and in real time. You talked about making decisions in the absence of concrete impact data. And you also talked about a whole host of categories around data privacy and governance. And we know that, school systems are not always operating with clean data. And so there's a whole bunch of stuff that's what folks are navigating right now, right? And so I'm curious, how have you approached that? What has the journey been like in terms of generative AI for the Denver Public Schools? What are you learning along the way?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, what I keep in mind and I remind all of my team members about is kindergartners in our classrooms today are the graduating class of the year 2035. When you think of that, you've got to think about what that world is going to be like, what the workforce is going to be like, and then how do you prepare students for such a workforce for jobs that don't even exist, aren't even conceived yet. And it's a huge, huge challenge for us as educators to be able to do that. So a lot of times when it comes to technology, what we're trying to do is to predict what the technology will be at the time. And then how do we use today's technology to prepare for something that doesn't even exist yet? It's a hard problem to solve. So I think generative AI can help in that regard, and that they may be able to help with some of be a thought partner in the prediction process to see what skill sets are really required for students to be able to be successful regardless of what technology is there. And so I've been thinking about that for quite some time. I worked on some of that visionary work in the past in a local school district where we talked about some of the details of what those skill sets are. And I took a team of teachers up to NIST in Boulder, Colorado. It's the National Institute of Standards and Time in Boulder, one of the national labs. And it was a great meeting because I met the lead scientist there at the time. And we had a conversation about what is it that is the skill that is most valued for employers for a time where technology continually is changing. And we were surprised, but at the same time, it made total sense. And his response was, if an applicant understands how they learn material and how they learn new material, and if they can get up to speed with that material quickly and turn around and create products from that knowledge, that is the most valuable asset. So it brings me back, and that was probably around 2010, 2011 timeframe. And I think that still holds true. You want students to know themselves as learners, what works well for them as a learner, and how do they like to consume material. And I know there's a lot of research around the ineffectiveness of learning styles, and that has been well documented. But still, understanding how you like to get information is important. We're seeing all of these different modalities available now in terms of video and blogs like Medium and other platforms that have these quick snippets of videos, YouTube shorts. I think Instagram has shorts as well. There's a wide range of things that we don't even know yet that will be out there as these things continue to evolve. And so how do you consume that information? So
Hey,
indeed, yes. I'm sorry.
this morning Yeah, this morning, just before you transition over, I was reading a quick New York Times thing, and it said the quote was, "The shift will be away from the technical skills and more towards the things that make us uniquely human."
Mhm.
Right? That's what we'll be having to think through as a school system. And to your point, like the portrait of a graduate stuff, there that is stuff we've been doing for a while. However, we now have to go back into those, things and say, what of this actually makes us uniquely human? And are we missing some skills in that process?
Adam, that's exactly right. And I will also bring up Dr. Tony Wagner of Harvard University, who has a great YouTube video. I encourage you all to take a look at it. It's called Play to Passion to Purpose. And it talks about the fact that information is now a commodity. Everyone has access to it through our cell phones. And so it's no longer what you know, it's what you can do with what you know. And I think that is still true today. So the technologies may change. It may offer new abilities. And the question is going to be, for those students in the future, what can we do with that new information? Because everyone has the information, which is a huge shift away from what it was in the past in terms of, what corporations were looking for. So we really do think that preparing students for a future like this is going to be important. And from my perspective, partnering with local corporations in a wide variety of industries, and I'm focusing mainly on those industries that are heavy in Colorado, the defense industry, aerospace industry. Colorado is a very solid state in aerospace, are the ones that we're looking at to partner with to say, you know, how do we get teachers aware of all of the content and all of the happenings in these industries so that they can be better prepared to speak to them when they're standing in front of students. So teacher externships is something that we're looking at, student internships, and just making sure that project-based learning is a very solid anchor for um, all of the work around uh, problem solving and addressing whether or not students are ready to be global leaders. There's nothing more effective than project-based learning. And some of the research that I've seen in the past indicated that project-based learning is a second kind of experience has some sort of effect sizes through the roof. And we do believe in its ability to change and give a comprehensive view of a problem that is transdisciplinary, right? It's covering all of the disciplines, plus the expectation is that there's some clear outcomes at the end
Mm.
that people can act on.
Okay.
Sense.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. And it sounds like AI, generative AI in some ways has been a catalyst for the practices that you wanted to see, from the get-go around, life readiness and things for students, partnerships and things like that. So I know one of the other ways that you all have sort of prepared organization-wide is to extend invitations to others to learn and to collaborate. And so, I know you all hosted a summit on January 18th. Tell us a little bit more about that, what you were what the outcomes were that you were sort of seeking with that endeavor.
Yeah, so I got a chance to work with Adam on that. We scheduled a meeting after we had a number of conversations. I think it was at which conference was it? There was a conference in San Diego that we attended, and Adam and I said, yeah, we probably need to host something around artificial intelligence, because what we heard pretty clearly as we sat on these panels is that teachers need training in a basic what is artificial intelligence, but also then how do I use it to support curriculum instruction assessment and perhaps even operations of the school district. And so that is lacking right now. And I think a lot of books are also taking a stab at it, right? Whether they're in education or not, you have, like Baskin Robbins, 51 different flavors of what artificial intelligence is. And so it's important for us to recognize that we have some sort of quality baseline around that understanding. And then secondarily, how to train teachers and leaders within school districts to be able to leverage AI as a tool that would be able to impact curriculum instruction, assessment, and all the other pieces. And so from our perspective, we felt it would be necessary to bring together districts across all of Colorado. And we put it out there for the Calais group and a number of other organizations within the state of Colorado. And so we went ahead and held it. I think we had about 16 to 20 districts that showed up. And those districts really appreciated that work because we talked about what is basic AI, how is it used. People were under the impression that these things were thinking on their own and had a personality and everything else. And then, of course, after discussions, we realized it's all based on machine learning and weights and some complicated mathematics. But overall, this thing is predictable in terms of how it's going to be able to behave. What's scary to me about it as well, as we talk about this, Julie, is making sure that because it's anchored in neural networks, there is a lot of the machinery behind neural networks that is not seen, and how the machines are actually making those connections. It's unclear. And so some of that variability is coming out in generative AI solutions because you hear things like hallucination, right? It's going to be able to think of something very creative as a response that is nowhere near the real world. There are all sorts of examples of that. And most recently, we had an attorney, can't remember the state, but there was an attorney who relied on ChatGPT to do some of the research on previous cases, and it created all of these wonderful cases that really don't exist, and lost the case as a result. So it's important for us to understand the technology behind it and bring other school districts along. We also had a panel of teachers that talked about how they're using ChatGPT right now, since it's the prevalent one, but with the advent of Gemini from Google and some of the other tools, it's going to change drastically. One of our teachers talked about, and Adam, you were there, talked about using, I think it's HeyGen, as an application that would allow the teacher to communicate with second language learners, English language learners who were struggling, and a very powerful tool that makes it look as if a teacher is speaking a different language with all of the gestures and everything else. And so those are the sorts of tools that we're now starting to see that are emerging for teachers to leverage. But again, today is one day, but in a matter of a month or 6 months, things are going to be drastically different. So what we keep talking about is, what is that? What are those aspects of this creative generative AI technology that we want to be able to hold on to? So even if it changes, the fundamental skills are still there, and we can leverage as a school district.
All right. So Julie, I have a burning question and then two other things to add what he said. The burning question is, does Baskin Robbins still only have 51 flavors? I mean, I thought they got past that, but I don't know.
That's a
We'll have to look
great
that up.
burning question. You would think that by now they would have at least double that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I love the analogy, but I thought, I wonder if there's more than 51. The comment on that teacher was, it was so strong that they actually had the local news there. And Dr. Charles and I were like, yeah, we're going to be on the news because we're running this summit. And then they ran the story. And I think Dr. Charles was on for a little bit, but it was the teacher.
It's
But
all
what
about
was
speed.
powerful about what he said was that he said, these kids, they don't want to read, and, as much of the content as I have to give them, and everything I give them is text based. And he said, I figured out a way to use these tools to actually make it seem like I was speaking in her language. And she just lit up, and that really changed the narrative of, and her trajectory in the school. So, and he was not big into AI before he figured out that use case. And then he really he was a piece of work, actually. I really enjoyed that part of the day. And then the last thing is, the night before, you have to understand too, like, you listen to Dr. Charles talk and then his background. He is like 9 levels deeper into this stuff than I am. And so we're at dinner and he starts saying stuff, and I look at him, I go, don't say any of that tomorrow because you are
That's
so
true.
much
That's
smarter
very, very
than
true.
I was like, no one's going to be able to follow anything you just said. And he's looking at me like, you get it? And I'm looking at him going, nope, I don't get any of what you just said.
Yeah, it's very exciting work for me, and again, I'm passionate about it, but passionate in bringing people along as we discover all of the nuances and all of the abilities of these tools. The other thing that I'm excited about that probably is beyond the scope of this particular talk is quantum computing. So we're exploring some ways in which we can start developing some career pipelines in that arena as well. And so we're working on that as a school district.
Very cool.
See what I mean? That's the kind of stuff he was doing at dinner. And I was like, oh, now you're way above where I am.
But I think people are wondering about that, right? They see how much of a sea change this has been, and they want to know what's next. Like, what else are we going to have to prepare for out on the horizon? So I think it's really important that you're starting to talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
But I do think the summit was pretty successful from the standpoint that we had people telling us like this was very helpful. We had no idea like really what to expect coming in. But they were all taking things away. I wonder, Dr. Charles, do you think there's like, have you had contact with folks after? Is there a next step for the summit or what do you think?
Yeah, so we had tremendously positive feedback, and we're thinking, I spoke to a number of people at the event where there was some interest in shifting it around so that other districts can host it. So I'm working right now to figure out the next location that we'll be going into to have that a similar conversation, but perhaps going a bit deeper and starting to develop a needs assessment of districts across the state. You know, I was part of the Council of Great City Schools and Council of School Networks preparation of the K through 12 AI readiness checklist. And in that checklist, it talks about all of the aspects that you need to be thoughtful about as we approach generative AI and all of the tools associated with it. And it does a great job, but it can be overwhelming for school districts. And so having models for other school districts to be able to see how they are implementing, for example, a cross-functional team throughout the organization, throughout the school district, that would start to approach the issue of generative AI and how to put policies in place and how to put the guardrails in place around disciplining students. Because Adam and I have had conversations about this particular topic. Cheating is a great example. This whole notion that all of a sudden students are going to be able to cheat if we were to give them a calculator, and then calculators came and the percentage of students who were cheating before calculators remains exactly the same as those after. Same thing is happening with generative AI. And Adam, I think you were posting some stuff about that recently.
Yeah, I posted something yesterday. Just I'm trying to get the focus away from the plagiarism tools and onto, the academic integrity conversation, cheating being part of it, which is not to say like, okay, what do we do for cheaters, but to discuss like, first of all, let's get to the root cause of why the kids cheat to begin with. And then secondly, what do we do when they do cheat? And how do we, use this as a teachable moment and not we're going to ruin your entire education career now because you used, chat GPT and you probably had very little communication from the education institution on ways that you should and shouldn't use it. Right. And so we just have to be very cognizant of that for these learners as well, as we tackle these really difficult problems.
And I think there's also the challenge of what is cheating, right? There's so many different ways you can use ChatGPT effectively without cheating. And one example would be you upload all of the essays that you've ever written and you say, in my own voice, go ahead and write a draft essay on this particular topic. And then you go in and you make some edits to that. So who do you reference there? Do you reference yourself or do you reference ChatGPT? It's all of those things that become fundamental issues. And teachers are really not at a point to understand the nuances of those types of examples. And that's why we think it's important for us to continue to bring these folks together across the state to continue to have these conversations.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I think that underscores too that the idea of a systemic approach, right? If everyone's making those decisions in individual classrooms or in individual schools, You go back to the Baskin Robbins. It's 31 flavors, just for the record.
Oh, it's 31. Yes, sir.
Right. But yeah, so I think that really underscores that need to have that systemic approach and establish that baseline like you were talking about, for sure.
Absolutely.
So one of my colleagues asked me, since I started learning about generative AI, if I had any existential crises. And I'm wondering, like, with all that you know and all that you have experienced around generative AI, have you made any changes to how you approach your life?
My personal life.
Yeah.
Yes, I think it's very interesting. I'm realizing that human contact is much more important as we continue with all of this, right? So having a good conversation about a great book is something that's important. When we shifted to books that were online, a host of books were able to do so effectively. I was not one of them. I love gathering PDFs, and yes, I love reading math papers and all of that good stuff. But I'll give you an example. My daughter she says, you know what? I have a Kindle, I have an iPad, I can use all of these to read a book, but really there's nothing to replace touching a book, touching the tome and just enjoying it. And so she reads very quickly and goes through books like nobody's business. So I'm realizing that those things that we take for granted today are much more important as we continue, because I think, Adam, you've said in the past, this is the least intelligent that this will be at any given time today. And so it will only get better, faster, and multimodal is going to be the main thing moving forward. So there's going to be more distance from those things that we hold dear. And so we have to be mindful of how we are going to curate those things moving forward. And that's what I think about. So art and
It's
all.
funny.
Yeah.
Well, he said that what I said, he made me sound so much smarter. I said, this is the dumbest they'll ever be. But he sounds so much smarter.
It's the truth though. It's only going to get faster and smarter. And the things that we enjoy today, we will miss tremendously. So being mindful of those things is really important. I no longer wear an Apple Watch. I was one of the early adopters,
Mm.
and I just wear analog watches now because of some of the pieces around that, the artistic beauty and
Mm.
all of those things, which is very different.
Interesting.
And I know we're running up on time, Joy. I know you're going to wrap up soon, but I think if we could at least do a couple minutes on, math with generative AI, since that's the background. Because again, don't share some of the stuff you shared at dinner because people's head will be spinning. But just on a basic level, what is your kind of thought process on mathematical instruction and how these tools, especially with what we've seen from Gemini, might kind of impact some of that in good and maybe some, risky ways?
Adam, that's a great question. So I would say this, our schools are not preparing students for a world of mathematics and AI. We've known that for years. If you look at the TIMSS report and the PISA reports that look at all of the countries across the globe and how they're preparing students, it's quite a challenge. And so the United States has a huge mountain to climb when it comes to this topic. I used to be a huge proponent of calculus being the pinnacle of the high school experience. I no longer believe that whatsoever. I do believe that every student needs to have some foundation in statistics. So AP statistics is important. And then some notion of linear algebra. Yeah, the students have to know linear algebra because it's the fundamental mathematics of all of what they are about to experience in this generative AI world and artificial intelligence world. So I would strongly recommend taking a look at the state of Georgia. It has a focus on developing those types of courses for students at the high school level, and they're doing a wonderful job. So I just wanted to make that note that as we have this conversation, because if you're looking for a model for a state that's doing cutting edge work around linear algebra, that would be it.
Hmm.
So what about Wolfram's computational thinking piece too? What's your thought process on how that needs to be more integrated?
Yeah, so Wolfram Alpha is the instantiation of Mathematica. For those of us who are unfamiliar with Wolfram, um, Mathematica was one of the first, if not the first, mathematics engine that you can type in um, a list of commands, and all of a sudden it would be able to solve mathematics problems. ChatGPT 3.0, 3.5 had some significant challenges with solving mathematics problems. And I was very surprised when I saw the extent to which that was just bad mathematics. Couldn't solve certain problems, couldn't do matrix multiplications and things of that nature. I believe that Wolfram Alpha and the Wolfram organization decided to develop an API for ChatGPT, and it is now in 4.0, and it will only get better as well. So it's important for folks to understand that the mathematics is not fully baked yet, still makes lots of errors. And some of my investigations with it, I'm understanding the types of errors that it's making. And so it's important that for people to understand that you can now do more things in mathematics around it, but not as much as you will be able to do tomorrow. Fundamentally important. But again, make sure that you are having students look at statistics and at linear algebra. And overall, data science as a career is going to be critically important. So those students looking to work in the arena, it's a combination of programming, statistics, some advanced mathematics, and then content knowledge in any field that you would like. It used to be actuaries were the only ones who had that sort of specialization, but this really opens the door for a lot of folks who want to get into mathematics and artificial intelligence.
Fantastic. Appreciate that perspective. Thank you. We have run the gamut today in terms of our conversation. That's been really informative. So thank you so much for sharing your insight and expertise. We really appreciate it. I wonder if you could leave us with just some thoughts around what's the next level of work for you all within the Denver Public Schools.
Next level of work is to make sure that we have our schools and our academics teams all having the same conversation about what needs to change in curriculum, instruction, and assessment to prepare students for a world that includes AI and quantum computing and all of those pieces. So it's a huge ask, but it's work that needs to be done. I'm not certain that there are other folks that have this solved yet. And so we want to make sure that we are at the cutting edge with all of that work. And when I took this position, the superintendent basically said to me, I want to be able to lead the nation when it comes to talking about technology and education. And so I was hosting a team building event on Monday of this week. And one of the team members say, is it possible for us as an IT organization to lead the nation without other parts of the organization leading the nation? So that's our work, bringing the other part of the organization along so that they understand the implications and the potential impact that this can have on the world. And so we're excited to take that on.
Awesome. Well said.
These have been pretty awesome. You are the first person we interviewed for our podcast.
Oh, really?
So the historical event for us. We didn't want to tell you that at the beginning because we didn't want you to be like, oh, I better be really good. And actually, you didn't disappoint. You were absolutely amazing. I could talk to you for hours. Julie was texting me saying, gosh, I hope this ends soon, but not me, buddy. I could talk to you for hours, as you
That's
know.
hilarious. Well, thank you so much for having me again. It's been a pleasure to work with you, and I look forward to continuing this conversation. If ever you wanted to have any follow-ups, I'd be happy to do that.
That'd be
For sure.
Thanks so much, Dr. Charles.